Good day everyone and welcome to another tutorial. In this tutorial we will be talking about motion blur, specifically for anime, but you can apply this to any project you want to. As you can see, I've already got a basic scene set up here. I've already got my materials set up. I just want to show you what they are. Because I want the motion blur to only affect my moving object, which is what you often find in anime, that the background stays crisp. It's usually painted if they wanted motion in it, but generally it stays crisp while the characters get blurred. So in this case, I'm separating this material out. The usual pass index I use for cartoon materials is 4, but in this case I'm using 2 to separate this one out. I just want to show you that it works, and to prove that it works, I also added a cube animation, which you can see here sliding in like that, just using array modifiers, so that they slide in as quickly as 20 frames. I'm using 30 frames per second, so you can imagine that's how quick it is. Now I already did a basic animation of the monkey. This is an monkey head, so that you can see that it moves, stops, various speeds, various directions, and some rotations. The rotations are important. And yeah, I do want to add though that adding motion blur to every scene in your production or project or whatever is not consistent with the actual style. Usually, because this is a hand-drawn thing, they only apply motion blur to action sequences or very specific cherry-picked scenes, as it's commonly referred to. So for motion like this, you'd probably want to turn off the motion blur because it causes smearing where it's not needed. So you can definitely keyframe your compositing for this. Okay, so let's get to the compositing actually. So I'm just going to pick a nice fast frame so you can see how it moves. This is a nice transition. So let's pick this one and hit render. Okay, now as you can see, this is just a clean frame with some freestyle on the cubes as well. So if you go into your node editor, you'll see I have Z enabled. I've got my vector pass. You can see this is the vector pass over there, see? And I've got my index. Now, since these are already turned on, they've already been rendered. So if you were to look at them like this, see that, some color, some depth, which usually you have to normalize in order to be able to see. So let me just show you what that looks like that. And I don't know how to get rid of alpha, and of course you get image. Okay. So let me just get rid of that. Okay. So what I want you to do is I want you to add a texture, any cloud texture, as long as it's not a color one. I've already added one, just simple as going in here, clicking there. I've added one called motion control. As you can see, it's the default settings, absolutely nothing changed on it. It's the default cloud texture. So all you need to do is just Shift A, input texture. Wanted it to go faster than that. Motion control, and just look at it in your viewer because you have to shrink it down a bit. So go for, let's go for 6 and 4. So it's still square, but it's got a nice look to it. Okay, sharpen it up with a color ramp node. Something like that. You can make it, you can adjust this. It's not mandatory for you to get it right off the bat. Ooh. Okay, so let me just chuck that one. Okay, that's great. Now we need to separate our monkey so that only the monkey receives motion. So you need to just stick that in there. Go for your converter, ID mask. That goes in there. Make sure you know what's what. We're going for 2, anti-aliasing. See, okay, now our white is our monkey. So let's quickly multiply this over our speed. Don't clamp it. If you clamp it, you limit the vector pass. and then stick that into the white and make the green black. Okay, now there is our speed definition. The black spots create streaks in our motion blur, just like you saw in the example. So if you were to now, why did I add the mix node there? I don't know. So if you were to add a blur node now, vector blur, this becomes your speed pass, and you go back to the image for your original image, and of course your Z. There you go. As you can see, it only affects the monkey, and you've got these cool streaks. Now look here, you can see this one goes straight out that way, and this one goes straight this way. If you want better curved lines, then just turn on curved. It calculates a slight curve between the vectors, giving you more of it gives you a nicer result in most cases. It's not stable, so don't overdo it with the blur value. If you want the blur to be super obvious, I would keyframe this higher. If you don't want it to be super obvious, just keep it on 1. It will give you a still nice result. I prefer to keep it on 1, so that's what I'm going to be doing here. So I just want to show you that it does not affect the background. So I'm going to take it back to this area so it moves to the left, as you can see. So if I press render on that, see, absolutely nothing happens to the cubes. Zip. Okay, so let's just pick a cool frame. This one is fast, but I'm looking for one that goes straight like that. So now you can see it's not super blurred. The only thing that I will say though is for slow moving objects like the monkey over here, you don't want to blur active for it, because this is what happens. See, it creates this fuzziness. So if you don't need it, don't use it. It's better to have clarity in most cases. The blurring only adds punch for action sequences. So in this case, I'm going to turn it off from there. Frame is selected. Going to say insert keyframe, next frame, all down to 0. Insert keyframe, and hit save. So if I were to go here now and I were to hit render, you would see nothing happen. Just like that. Okay. So that's all that there is to this method. I will say though that I'm glad that this particular method is relative depending on your resolution. So you can do it at 50 and then render out in HD and still get a good result. The one thing that I will warn about is I use 32 samples. Now if you use 32 samples, just want to show you what happens. I'm going to use this as a great example. Okay, now mine is set to high quality. I want to show you what happens if you don't have it on high quality. That's what happens. You see, you get this ghosting type effect. So if you want to get this clean, you can either set this to high, which slows down the entire compositing system, or you can just put this on 64, which will also give you a much better result. Having said that, I found that in general, for my projects or the projects that I have done in the past, setting it to high quality is a faster result overall. And that's it for this tutorial. Have a great one, and God bless.